Welcome to another program of Peace is Possible. There have been vigils in West Hartford for ending the horror that is occurring in Gaza, as there have been around the world. Today we have two guests who are speaking out for those who are suffering in Gaza. I would like to introduce Dr. Deborah Weidner, a practicing psychiatrist who has been involved with mental health work in Gaza, and Mr. Omar Scott Antar from the Connecticut Palestine Alliance, which has been working to alert people in our state to the horror being created by the continuing war and embargo on Gaza. Dr. Deborah Weidner is a seasoned child, adolescent, and general psychiatrist. She was deployed in Gaza in September on a mental health mission sponsored by the Palestinian American Medical Association, or PAMA, and Islamic Relief. During this mission, she spearheaded the development of the Strengthening Resilience Initiative for medical staff at Al-Nasser Hospital in collaboration with the Gaza Ministry of Health and the World Health Organization. Dr. Weidner completed her psychiatry residency at the University of Pennsylvania, her child-adolescent psychiatry fellowship at Harvard Children's Hospital in Boston, and her MBA at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Omar Scott Antar is the co-founder of Connecticut Palestine Alliance, which is dedicated to engaging with elected officials, the media, and the public to bring justice and peace to Palestine. Omar Antar is also a volunteer for the Justice for Palestine in Congress family of political campaigns, which are principally targeting the 5 congressional districts of Connecticut with third-party or independent party candidates. Omar Antar obtained his A.B. cum laude from Harvard University in biochemistry, a Master's of Science in biochemistry from Albert Einstein College of Medicine, New York, and a Master's of Science in microbiology from Columbia University, New York, and a Master's of Business Administration from UConn Stores in Healthcare Management. I would just like to add a perspective I think that I want the viewers to think about before we start the interview. Stopping what Amnesty International has termed a genocide in Gaza is in the interest of all peoples in the region and the world, including the Israeli people. Both Israelis and Palestinians would be benefited by peace and an end to the horror in Gaza. We in the United States would benefit by moving the money from weapons to schools, critical infrastructure, and other critical needs. I thank you both for being here and for your dedication to the work of rendering assistance to those who are suffering in Gaza. Dr. Weidner, please tell the viewers about your work in Gaza.
Sure. Thank you very much for having us on your show for peace, which is, of course, what we all need and pray for. I was very privileged and had the honor to go to Gaza, to the area called Khan Yunis, to the hospital called Nasser Hospital Complex. And as stated by Mr. Wasserman, I was on a medical mission, what we call emergency medical teams, that started flowing into Gaza in January of 2024. Mostly surgeons and other such specialists and also specialized nurses. But in July, for the first time, mental health professionals were engaged to enter Gaza. But believe it or not, there were only 2 of us that signed up. And so myself and one other psychiatrist were the first 2 mental health professionals to enter in an emergency medical team into Gaza. We were canceled in July, which is kind of par for the course, that you're never quite sure if you're going in, if you've been approved to go in. But then we were rescheduled for a month later, and we went in August. And our mission was to implement phase 1 of the Strengthening Resilience program that you mentioned. Phase 1 being observe and do an assessment of the current state of the healthcare providers, the staff at Al Nasser Hospital complex, and see exactly what level of trauma is being experienced, psychological trauma, burnout, a term that we often use here, the level of exhaustion that folks were undergoing. So that was the primary focus of our mission, and also to provide education. So we also did some educational sessions on, which was psychological first aid, and also on the basics of addressing people in crisis, mental health crises in the emergency room or on the medical floors.
Thank you. What is the most important thing our viewers should know about conditions in Gaza?
I would like for the viewers to understand that anything that you can imagine Gaza to be like, it is worse than that. Even myself, who was tied and tethered to Instagram before I went to Gaza to know exactly what was going on and what I should expect, even I was not prepared for what I saw on the ground firsthand. I would say, even after being there a few days, it still took me time to absorb the gravity of what was happening there. There's the gravity of the sheer level of destruction. Driving from the minute you actually enter into Gaza to Nasser Hospital, the rubble and the destruction of every building that you drive by, the bullet holes, the bomb holes, the mounds of dirt and rubble, the children playing on those mounds of rubble. And then you get to the hospital, and we saw the remains of the mass grave out from our windows. There was a horrible incident earlier on, I think it was October, November of 2023, of a siege on Nasser Hospital, and about over 300 people were murdered and put into a mass grave once there was a pull out of military forces. The bodies were recovered and appropriately buried, and that was basically our view from where we stayed in the hospital. So the constant reminders of the death and destruction, and then the day-to-day life. You imagine your day-to-day life here, from the minute you wake up to the moment you go to bed. Everything is impacted in that you can think of in your day-to-day life compared to how it is in Gaza. You wake up, you have water. They don't have water. They have to wait for the water truck to come and fill a water jug. You have your breakfast. They don't have food. They don't have flour. It could be days until a humanitarian aid truck gets in to provide enough food in order to eat. Or you have to depend on an NGO kitchen that is providing food for people. Toiletries. I remember hearing from one of the medical students that they stopped brushing their teeth with toothpaste 6 months ago. That was back in August, because you can't buy it. There's no stores. There's no place to buy anything. It's literally people setting up tables along a dirt road selling things. And the range of things that are being sold is extremely narrow. Maybe chips and cookies or biscuits, maybe cooking oil, maybe some diapers if you're lucky, a lot of items being sold that were removed from buildings and homes. So maybe there's a merchant who's selling car parts, maybe a merchant selling plumbing and electric parts. That it's beyond anything that you can comprehend, is what I would want people to know about the day-to-day life.
Thank you. What should our viewers know about the trauma being experienced by the people of Gaza?
The trauma that I would like the viewers to understand is the severity and intensity of the trauma. I've come to think of it in basically three buckets. There's the trauma of death. So many people have lost their lives to the extent, I'm not sure what the exact number is, but generations of families have been killed to the point that their name has been eliminated from the Palestinian registry. So they're just completely gone. The family line is gone. And then there's the physical trauma. I was a bit overwhelmed by the number of amputees that I saw. So walking down a dirt road, you see people on crutches without limbs, or a mother or a father carrying a child, a toddler who's missing an arm or a leg, or head injuries or eye injuries or disfigurement, a lot of disfigurement. So there's the physical trauma, there's the physical trauma of malnourishment, where people are trying to recover from their illnesses and they have a very hard time. I remember being on the surgical ward where there was a young girl, like probably preteen, extremely thin. She'd had shrapnel injuries and she'd had multiple surgeries from that. She had one pretty serious surgery, thoracic surgery, and then she had an external device on her leg keeping her broken bones in place. And the healing is so slowed down because of the lack of nourishment and also the psychological state that many people are in, because they just don't know what is coming next. And then there's the psychological trauma, the trauma of widows who have lost their husband who is a provider, children who have lost parents. There's the constant, is the bomb, when's the next bomb gonna hit? While I was there, I unfortunately became an expert in the sounds of war. So you know what an F-19 fighter jet sounds like. You know what a tank fire sounds like. You know what sniper fire sounds like. You know what helicopter fire sounds like. You know what the large bombs sound like versus the small bombs. And it's constant. The drone buzzing is constant. It's really, it's unimaginable. It's unearthly. It's just not anything that you can imagine until you're actually there. And I found the sounds quite, that really got to me, the sounds. So in the middle of the night, maybe a bomb would go off that would rattle the building and wake me up from my sleep, which by the time I left Gaza, I was sleeping through that. But when I first got there, I would wake up every time there was a bomb, because the bombing would pick up at night while everybody was trying to sleep. And then I would be awake and I would hear the drones, that motor sound of the drones. And I would say to myself, what are they looking for? It's nighttime, everybody's asleep. And I would ask people, I would ask of course, the Palestinian people, what is going on there? And they would tell me it's psychological. And sometimes the sounds would be broadcast from the drones or from the public speaker system of babies crying, dogs barking, just anything to just continue to break them down. Again, I learned about forms of psychological trauma and breaking people down in a way that I didn't know existed.
Thank you. The American people should know about two reports that came out recently. One is from Amnesty International that basically decried what's happening in Gaza as a genocide. Everyone should know about this report. The other report that everyone should know about is the Human Rights Watch report that came out that basically stated that the Israeli regime, the Netanyahu regime, is intentionally denying water to the people of Gaza. Would either of you like to comment on that?
Yes. The first report by Amnesty International actually came out on December 5th of 2024, and they did an investigation of the actions in Gaza, and they determined that what Israel was doing was committing a genocide. And the Human Rights Watch, they came out with their report on December 19th of 2024, and as you said, that they highlighted in particular, they also declared the actions of Israel as a genocide, but they highlighted the deprivation of water of the Gaza population, and that act is in particular, a form of genocide, So Amnesty International, in particular, even before October 7th, 2023, they I guess have established them as a good record in analyzing the situation in Gaza and Palestine in general, and because they declared Israel as an apartheid state even before October 7th, and they are very careful to analyze, not just to make a political statement, but to actually do an investigation of the actions within Gaza, and they determined that Israel is committing a genocide, and so these reports will be very helpful in the International Court of Justice and perhaps the International Criminal Court, because the ICJ, they made a preliminary injunction that Israel is committing a plausible, as they say, plausible genocide, because they also, I guess they even have a slower process, and they have to adjudicate whether there is a genocide occurring in Gaza. But this investigation by Amnesty International, I think, will bolster that case, a great deal, and so it's very profound that the Amnesty International came out with this finding and published it in December.
Yeah, and I would urge our viewers to do a search for both of these reports. The recent Amnesty International report you said came out in December.
December 5th, yes.
December 5th, and the recent Human Rights report, which I think came out a little bit later.
Yes, December 19th.
There we go, December
19th.
19th, yeah. I would urge our viewers to just do a search on these reports. These are both well-respected organizations. They're both critical of both regimes, many regimes around the world, left and right. You can't poo-poo these reports.
Yeah. They're very cautious and conservative, because actually they've gotten under, especially Human Rights Watch, has gotten under criticism of being too cautious. And so if they come out with this definitive statement, I think you can be rest assured that it's backed by substantial evidence.
Yeah. So please, if you have any doubts about what we're talking about, look up these reports. What else are we not hearing about in our corporate controlled media? The media in this country is very influenced by big money interests. They're owned by very large corporations. They're very often influenced by the advertisers who do have a say in what's reported or what isn't reported, or what's emphasized is or isn't emphasized. So we have to look beyond what I call the corporate media, what they're saying, and what are we missing in the corporate media?
a great deal. So yeah, I would classify the media into sort of two camps. One is the corporate media, as you mentioned, or the mainstream media, and then there's the more newer types of media called independent media that is often found on YouTube and Rumble and other online platforms. So the corporate media obviously been around for decades, and but its viewership is declining, and its credibility has been shot from the Iraq War and many other failures of the American government, because they're simply parody or handmaidens of the U.S. government over the decades, and so it's a hopeful sign in that many people are migrating towards independent media. But independent media has its own pitfalls. Some are very good, and such as Democracy Now, which is has a long record. But even newer, just podcasts where people who have their own independent expertise and are able to get other experts to report on their knowledge, have been able to enlighten us about what's actually going on in Gaza. And of course, there is the kind of the raw media, the raw Instagram that Sister Deborah Weidner was able to view, and also Telegram and other Twitter platforms where you can actually see even the Israeli soldiers broadcasting their own war crimes, which has been used as evidence in the ICJ cases as well. And so there are hopeful signs, and unfortunately it doesn't dominate the American public and especially the older generations. But there's hopeful signs that the information, including on TikTok, which was attempted to be banned, there's hopeful signs that information, the truth of the reality of the situation in Gaza, is coming out and reaching the public.
Yeah, and I would urge our viewers to check out some of these alternative, independent sources of information, such as Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, and The Intercept, Truth Out, just to name three off the top of my head.
Yeah.
If we can move on, let's talk about the embargo on Gaza. There is currently perhaps could be termed a fragile ceasefire going on, which is obviously it's a step forward that people are not, there's at least less shooting at each other. I don't know if it's a complete ceasefire. But there's the embargo, where Israel is denying some basic necessities from getting into Gaza. Dr. Weidner, would you like to speak to the issue of the embargo? And maybe that's the message we need to be getting to Congress right now, is to lifting the embargo.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were talking about this prior to your show, that you see in the media, even the media that I watch, which is on the ground kind of media, and contacting the colleagues that I befriended when I was in Gaza, because you hear about 600, 800 humanitarian trucks going in on the first day of the ceasefire, and those trucks are not getting to the people that I know. And I've also heard that people are still afraid, despite the ceasefire. The trauma, the fear, the anxiety of leaving your house, of trying to go out into the street and get the food because you could be shot. We've seen so many videos of a person shot, and then another person tries to retrieve them and they're shot at. I don't know if corporate media shows those kinds of things, but even just trying to retrieve somebody who's injured, you can be shot at. So people are understandably fearful to branch out of the encampments into wherever the humanitarian aid is being provided, for fear of what could happen. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I would suggest the word embargo is a little bit confusing. I would suggest the better word would be like siege of Gaza, because when we talk about embargo, often we think of the arms embargo that we're trying to get the U.S. Senate and the U.S. government to impose on the state of Israel, and because I guess. If it's okay with you, I'll
Yeah, go ahead,
I'll
please.
mention the
Please.
recent work that the Connecticut Palestine Alliance did. We were lucky enough to get a meeting with the foreign policy staffer of Senator Chris Murphy, and so we need to commend Senator Murphy, because he was one of the 19 senators who voted with Senator Sanders and a few others they put together what they called the JRD, or Joint Resolution of Disapproval of sending money for armaments, or sending armaments to the state of Israel. So this is the first step. Obviously, you'll need 60 votes to eventually and passage of the House and Senate, and signature by a president to actually implement it. But this is kind of like the first step, in which there was 19 votes. So it's impressive that you got 19, but obviously it's a very long way to go to actually impacting, stopping the weapons being transferred to the state of Israel. And so that meeting that the Connecticut Palestine Alliance had with Senator Murphy's staffer, I think was really important, because we had 10 people from across the state of Connecticut. It was actually initiated by the Northeast Connecticut Gaza Peace Group, but also the Connecticut Palestine Alliance. And there was even, people from the southern part of the state. Actually, there's a woman named Lana she's a Christian woman who has family in Gaza that has been killed. And so there's obviously the idea that Gaza is a monolith. They're all Muslim, but that's not true. There's a significant Christian population there, and that was targeted, and also churches were targeted by Israel, as well, of course, as mosques and schools and basically any building in Gaza. And so she mentioned how her family was affected, and but also I personally also raised the issue of Saudi Arabia, because it's a very topical matter, especially with Trump as president, in that there's an attempt to normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and this actually, that process would be an extension of the so-called Abraham Accords, which is actually, one can argue that the Abraham Accords is what initiated the actions of October 7th, because the so-called Abraham Accords are actually trying to attempt to destroy the Palestinian cause and the rights of the Palestinians, and destroy the possibility of a Palestinian state. And so the action of October 7th could have been a reaction to those accords to make sure that there is the rights for the Palestinians is maintained, particularly through a Palestinian state. And so this normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel is potentially a very bad strategy, because it depends on how insistent the state of Saudi Arabia is on insisting on a Palestinian state. If their past attitude persists, they will not insist on a Palestinian state. But things may have changed since the ceasefire and Trump's inauguration into the presidency. But I raised the issue with Senator Murphy and his staff that he should oppose the relations, the normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and in particular what the American government will grant Saudi Arabia, which is a security guarantee, meaning that American men and women will have to die for the royal palace of Saudi Arabia, in particular in any war between Saudi Arabia and in this case the United States and Iran. And so that would be quite outrageous. And so I insisted with Senator Murphy's staff that he oppose any security guarantee between the United States and Saudi Arabia.
Thank you. Yes, my perspective is stop the weapons. Weapons only lead to a cycle of violence. Stop the weapons. And I think Senator Murphy did the right thing by voting to stop the weapons. And then the next step is to end, whether we call it the siege or the embargo, so people in Gaza could eat and drink and have medical supplies. I think perhaps the viewers would agree that these are reasonable. These are reasonable concerns. Dr. Weidner, what is the most effective way to reach people in our community to bring home the reality of what is happening in Gaza?
Well, certainly shows like yours are helpful in bringing on the ground personal stories to the viewers. And I would say any opportunity that people have to interact with folks that do have experience with such things, to get those personal stories and really relate it to your own life is the best way to make a personal change, and then to advocate for the things that you believe in. I think interfaith forums are also another excellent way, because there's been so much politicism or politicization of what's going on, that sometimes it's hard to see through the politics and see the human beings, and it's the human beings that are suffering tremendously. You mentioned access to water. The well water has been intentionally destroyed. The wells have been filled with dirt and are no longer accessible, and every utility pretty much is the same. Greenhouses, gardens destroyed, olive tree gardens destroyed and burned, the electrical grid destroyed. I mean, anything that would give you any sense of normalcy has been destroyed. So, advocating to folks like Senator Murphy and your politicians. There are phone bank groups that are taking place that you can get involved with to make calls to your representatives. There are grassroots organizations that are also involved in advocacy, and there's also donations. So if you feel compelled to donate, there are certainly legitimate organizations that provide food and other necessities to people on the ground. And then there's individuals like myself who have personal contacts with people on the ground in Gaza, and people have approached me after many of these presentations to ask if they can send money, and so we've done a lot of that as well. So those are a few things that come to mind.
Thank you. So yes, let me build up upon that. Let me urge people to call Senator Murphy's office, Senator Blumenthal's office. If you live in West Hartford or the immediate Hartford area, to call John Larson's office, or whoever your representative is in the U.S. House of Representatives, and urge them to call for an end to the embargo or siege on the people of Gaza, and to make sure that this ceasefire holds. So please make that call. If you agreeing with what we're saying, make the call, and make the call again, and urge your members of your family and your friends and everybody else to call as well, so that they're hearing from people that people in our community want peace and an end to the horror in Gaza. But let me ask again, how about getting people more involved with helping to stop the cycle of violence? Is there a way people could reach the Connecticut Palestine Alliance?
Yes, absolutely. And I have the sheets in front of us here on the table. So the website is pretty simple. It's just PalestineCT.com, and the email address is info@PalestineCT.com. And I have a sign-up sheet if you want to get on our email list, our general email list. And there's also an option if you want to get more involved, not just get emails, but you can request to join the working group, and I'll ask you, to tell a little bit about yourself, and I'll share that information with the rest of the current working group. So we have a pretty wide range of persons in that group. One of the original kind of founders included Bishop John Selders, who many people know here in the Hartford area. He's part of Moral Mondays, Connecticut, and several people across the state. And so we have different projects going on. One of which was we helped draft the permanent ceasefire letter of the Connecticut General Assembly, meaning the Connecticut State House of Representatives and Connecticut State Senate. And we got 4 Connecticut State Senators and 14 Connecticut State Representatives to co-sign that letter. Miriam Kahn, State Representative Miriam Kahn out of Windsor, Connecticut, was kind of spearheading that effort. And so the next step beyond ceasefire is divestment. And so we hope we have a ceasefire, and of course we're cautious about it because it may or most likely will be broken, but regardless whether it's broken or sustained, we want to move forward with divestment. And we're following the path of the divestment of the state of Connecticut from the apartheid state of South Africa, and that happened in 1980, 81, and 82. There's a labor leader named John Fussell who was kind of the spearheader. He spearheaded that effort in the 80s, but he's still with us, and he's still helping us, follow that same path with divesting the state of Connecticut from the apartheid state of Israel. And there's other persons working with us. Stan Heller with the Middle East Crisis Committee, and he's been around for decades, and he's sort of pushing the investigation and the efforts about the Connecticut State Treasury. So the state of Connecticut invests money for its state employees and its pensions all across the world, and all different investments. And so Stan Heller and others, including myself, and the Connecticut Palestine, have asked, what is the Israeli component of those investments? And so the latest numbers from July of 2024 was $95 million are invested in both Israeli bonds and Israeli associated companies. So they were able to tease out both types of investments. And so we are looking into the legislation and the regulation of are there human rights clauses that we can use and highlight to the Connecticut State Treasurer. His name is Eric Russell at the moment, to force him to divest from these $95 million of investment, because recently Modi's has downgraded the investment quality of the state of Israel, and the current war has also as per business reports further degraded the investment health of Israeli companies, and of course the Israeli state. As per that evidence, Eric Russell did do something that when you, especially with bonds, you have to reinvest the money whenever it matures, and so he declined to reinvest one set of Israeli bonds investments of the state of Connecticut in Israeli bonds, and that was purely on a fiduciary grounds that he declined to reinvest. So it was the most passive way to quote unquote divest. So he did not take action to reinvest, and so he just let it lapse. So he should be commended for that, but obviously that's the least of that he could do, and he should divest actively from the companies and the remaining bonds that he have, both on moral, legal, and fiduciary grounds. And so that's kind of our biggest effort. If you can, join us with the Connecticut Palestine Alliance.
Thank you. There's also Jewish Voice of Peace. There's many Jews who say that this is against what the present Israeli government is doing, is against the basic tenets of Judaism. And Jewish Voice of Peace is raising that voice, so to speak. That's another group you could be looking into if the concerns we're raising make sense to you. What else, Dr. Weidner? What else can you share about what's happening in Gaza right now?
Well, it's a very interesting time to be on your show and to be talking to the viewers because of the ceasefire that's been issued. And so what exactly is happening right now and how much aid is getting to the people? And my understanding is as of day 7, people in Gaza will start to move. They'll start to relocate from a camp to perhaps where their family is originally from. So I didn't realize that many of the people that I met in the Khan Yunis area, which is more in southern Gaza, are from the north. And so when I asked them, what will you do now? Many of them have said, we're going to go north. And they want to see their house, whether it's rubble or still standing or partially standing. They want to recover deceased relatives. They want to go back to any sense of normalcy or any life. And that is extremely frightening, because if the ceasefire is not permanent, and then I don't even want to imagine. I don't want to imagine. People start to move about. We've heard about. I forget the technical term for it in military language, but that basically there are explosive devices that have been planted in people's homes, and there's already been incidents of people trying to go back to their homes and hands lost, arms lost because of explosive devices. So I'm on enough distribution groups that I've received and forwarded on to everybody that I could about how to approach your home if it's still standing, and what steps to take to try to identify and avoid such devices. There's so many things to take into consideration, and all of it is pretty frightening. But one, I guess, close to final message that I'd want to say is the people of Palestine. I've learned so much from them about how to live my own life, about what I think I need, and I would compel the viewers to think about that as well. What do you really need day to day? What is truly important to you in this earth, on this earth, in this life? How do you, how do you show your gratitude? How do you hope in the future? And that is something that the Palestinians have truly shown us day after day, 400 plus days, that that they have an enormous amount of faith, that whatever happens, they have their faith.
Yes. And I think it's important to get we get it. Our media gives us a very distorted view of what's going on. I can't emphasize that enough. And it's so important to get beyond what I call the corporate media. That gives that all too often gives a very one-sided view of the situation, and frames things in a way that fits their particular narrative.
Right.
And the way to get around that is through other sources, and through trying to understand the plight of the people who are directly involved with this, the Palestinians. One question I have is this Israel is making certain claims that Hamas is using these hospitals for their own purposes. Why doesn't Israel allow reporters into Gaza to verify these claims? That's the point I would make. We're hearing claims. Okay, let's get the reporters in to verify those claims. That my understanding is the healthcare professionals who are in these hospitals consistently have said there's no evidence of what Israel is claiming. So let's look beyond what we're being told. Any comments on that?
You read my mind. Being in the hospital, all I can tell you is 24 hours a day, they are dealing with mass casualty incidents, MCIs, waiting for the next MCI, which is the flow of severe casualties. Either there's a bomb that goes off and there's no casualties because everybody died, or there's a bomb that goes off and you wait for the influx of patients to care for them, whether you have supplies or not, whether you have anesthesia or not, whether you have gauze or not. And that's what the healthcare workers are doing. That's what I was doing when I was there for 30 days. That's what I'll be doing again when I go in March, God willing.
Yeah, and my concern is also the Israeli people are not getting a full view of what's going on, that their media is being censored. So I'm concerned about the censorship of the media. And could you talk about the targeting of journalists and the targeting of healthcare workers?
Absolutely. The journalist, the targeting of journalists has been well documented. And even in the most recent siege of the hospital in the north, more journalists were killed and none were allowed to go in afterwards as well once they were killed. And the targeting of healthcare workers it is protective. It's a fact, it's protective to have a foreign doctor in a hospital. The Nasser Hospital complex was safe as long as us foreign doctors are there. The recent hospital that was besieged in the north, once the foreign doctors were removed, the siege takes place. So it is a fact that the hospitals and the healthcare workers are either targeted or taken as hostages and tortured. And I met myself doctors who were released from that captivity, tortured. And what did they do the day they were released? They went back to work at the hospital.
Okay. Yeah.
And I also am part of or work with the Healthcare Workers for Palestine here in Connecticut, and they have a strong campaign to release. I think it's Hussam Abu Saifa, and so he was the medical director of the Kamal Adwan Hospital in the northern part of Gaza that I think Sister Deborah Weidner referenced. And so I think he's still in captivity by the state of Israel. And there were previous cases in the months prior where other directors of that hospital were captured and even tortured to death. And so the ones who returned, as Deborah mentioned, are in some senses the lucky ones. And so we're still working on that effort to even find information about what happened to Hussam. And of course, we want to release all, not just him, but all the healthcare workers and all the detainees, and hopefully the ceasefire will help facilitate that as well.
Could either one of you talk more about what the healthcare workers are doing in this state? I think it's Healthcare Workers for Palestine. Yeah.
Yes. So the Healthcare Workers for Palestine, they initially started most intensely in the New Haven area and Yale physicians and affiliated workers, so nurses and others. So they have a weekly vigil. Every alternating Tuesday and Wednesdays, they have a weekly vigil outside of the Yale New Haven Hospital, right at York and Cedar Street, And so I'm quite impressed with their efforts because it's been consistent. So even if you miss it one week, you can always go the next week. And so we need to thank Phil Brewer, who was here before, and have kind of insisting on that consistency. And it's even gotten the attention of the administration at the Yale New Haven Hospital, because they're like their COO came out personally with security to move them from one side of the street to the other, because at least he claimed that they have that sidewalk as the Yale property. I think that's a little unusual. We have to double check if that's actually true, because usually public sidewalks are public and owned by the city and not the private institution that they're adjacent to. It is having effect, and it's being taken notice, because there's even some local media, WTNH in particular, deserve praise for doing a lot of media on this issue and videotaping this vigil. And even the Instagram account of Hussam Abu Saifa, which I assume is being run by his son, even had that media, a clip of that media posted on Hussam's personal Instagram account. So our efforts is reaching out to the people in Gaza, and so we're very proud of that.
Yes, and there was also one at Hartford Hospital and one in New Britain Hospital as well. Please check out the Human Rights Watch reports, the Amnesty International reports. Consider getting involved in the organizations we suggested. And thank you for hearing us out. It's a view that I don't think we're getting in the mainstream media. Thank you.